Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we're going to do a brief dive into college football 25. And as you know, the official release is tomorrow, but I decided to go ahead and get the early release. And I just figured since we're doing the show, might as well do a quick recap of just kind of initial thoughts on the overall gameplay, presentation, etc. As somebody who has played NCAA games, the first NCAA game I remember playing was back in 2004 with Matt Leinart on the cover. So it's definitely been a long time coming for me, about, for everybody really, but a whole, almost 11 years since we've had a game. And, I think a lot of the time you read stuff on Reddit or other media programs and people always kind of find a way to complain about everything. But when I played the game, I overall I thought it was exactly as they delivered. I think you can tell that there was a lot of attention to detail, particularly with the home field advantage, the kicking meter, having 10,000 plus players in the game, and also one of my big worries as a general video game football player was how are you able to distinguish the college football game from a Madden game? And let me tell you, this game does not feel like a Madden game at all. To me, it feels like a college football game. I feel the energy of a college football stadium. Between the, you have the marching bands at the beginning, you have the home field advantage where let's say you are on the road and it is a big game, the crowd will actually really get into it. And what's been fun about it is I played with a couple of my buddies, and we did a couple games as some of the bigger schools, and we did some of the games as the smaller schools. And no matter what your team is out of the 134, I really do genuinely feel like there was something for everybody. Like, for example, we did one as the Charlotte 49ers, and coming to the stadium, they did have their own little tradition, and it highlighted Jerry Richards Stadium, and it did show some of the crowd members be all excited and everything. So it's good to know that they really did try their best to really get every team into the game and get those details going. And I haven't had much of a chance to play Dynasty mode. I kind of just messed around with it for a little bit, but it's gonna be fascinating because I think for maybe some people who are a little bit more casual, I can understand it perhaps being a little bit overwhelming to you have to handle the week-to-week game planning, then you have to handle in-season recruiting, then it's high school recruiting after you play the bowl game, and then on top of that it's NIL too. So I think for one part of it, I think what this game legacy will ultimately be is I think for one, it's going to get a lot more people watching on Saturdays. I think people are going to play the game and be like, wow, have I been missing out all these years? Or, hey, is there something about college football that, an NFL or an indoor team or arena football or whatever sport that you're into, is there something about it that, kind of speaks to me? And I always go back to it. I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of college football fans and people who are passionate about it just as much as I am will tell you, is that it has a certain, energy and spirit to it. And, there's a difference being out there when you see these kids playing who, for the most part, this is their one chance. In the NFL, hey, if you kind of shit the bed a little bit and you're not playing that good, you can always go sign with another team if you just got paid a bunch of guaranteed money. As opposed to a college game, when you're signed with that one school, granted, yes, you can transfer, but it's not as lucrative, and it's not as simple as the NFL, where you kind of sign a contract and that's really it. Now, granted, there are a lot more parallels in as for college football now as there were a couple years ago. Like, for example, there's a 2-minute warning now, 12-team playoff. So you can definitely tell that the things are kind of shifting more towards the NFL model. But at the same time, as much as some of those traditions have gone away to some extent, I do genuinely believe that I think part of what this game really brings out for people is reaffirming why people love college football and how it brings people together. Because a lot of things I think about as somebody who lived in Florida while I went to college is a lot of these smaller schools, and particularly in the South, that is your equivalent of a professional team. I would argue that down in Florida, people care more about Florida and Florida State than they do the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Tampa Bay Lightning, or obviously the Florida Panthers just won the Stanley Cup, but outside of those couple playoff appearances, people down in Florida will tell you that they're going to talk about the Gators and they're going to talk about the Seminoles. They're not going to talk about the Jaguars or the Lightning or whoever unless they're having a good year. So, overall, I found the gameplay was pretty crisp to me. I think some of the minor criticisms would be, I think the pursuit angles are a little bit unrealistic, and I think to some extent, some of the breaking of the tackles, particularly with the quarterbacks, for example, I think sometimes it's a little bit unrealistic in terms of how easily you can kind of scramble out of the pocket and they still kind of make a miraculous play. Now, granted, there is the quarterback meter, so it is, I think, supposed to be designed where you're not necessarily going to get all of those sort of give me throws all the time where you can't just button mash something and then it's going to throw a crisp pass every time. You're going to have to kind of have some finesse to it, and I think those kind of details are really what's going to kind of stand out with those particular games. But overall, there is something for everybody. I'm not an Ultimate Team guy, but you have Ultimate Team, you have playing on live, you have Dynasty mode, and also online when you play the multiplayer games and you eventually get enough wins, you do kind of go on what's an equivalent of a college football playoff where you'll play, I guess, 12 teams who are similarly ranked as you are, and then you kind of go on the quest and you try to win the game. So I would say overall, I highly recommend the game. I think there is something for everybody. I was been busy the past couple days, so granted, I don't think it was absolutely necessary to buy the early release. I think it was more of just kind of just being that excited to the point where I was like, for an extra $25-$30 and I have a couple hours in my day, why not just plug in the PS5 and start playing a little bit. But I think it's going to be intriguing to see kind of what the overall college football 25 legacy will be, and also just in terms of how much more people are going to be watching the game. And I think it's just going to bring more people together too. So I'm excited to hear what you guys think, and I'm just excited to be a college football fan.